Welcome to the Thursday night recap edition and news episode of the Fantasy Football Brothers podcast. My name is Blake, and I'm joined with my brother Carson. How you doing today?
I'm doing very well, and ready to analyze the strange loss for the Ravens.
Yeah, how about this exciting win for the Dolphins, right?
Yeah, it is, and we were talking about it a little bit before. People are probably underrating this Dolphins team. Not like they're should be rated extremely highly, but they are not a bottom-of-the-barrel team, most likely. They've just been dealing with a lot of injuries, and so I think they were still battling injuries this game, but they still
specifically
won.
on the defensive side. We had a couple weeks where they were down a corner or two. So, yeah, I think that they have the opportunity to kind of turn up the volume on the second half of the season and maybe it's difficult to be a contender in their division with the Bills, but or wait, do I have that wrong? I do.
No, I think that's right. It's Patriots, Bills.
No,
Jets,
yeah,
Dolphins.
that's right.
That's the division.
Okay.
Yeah, a seemingly weak division, but the Bills are not weak, and the Patriots have been playing very well. So
yeah, baby.
I won't give the Jets too much credit, but hey, they've even pulled out some upsets like against the Bengals. But yeah, and then the Ravens are in a really tough division, right? That's the Bengals, Browns, and Steelers. That's a very tough division.
Correctamundo.
Yes.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and let's jump right into the side that most people probably had players starting on, and that's the Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah.
So right off the bat, kind of a quiet night for Lamar Jackson. He got you 238 passing yards for one touchdown and one turnover right at the end of the game. That kind of sealed it for the Dolphins there, but 9 carries for 39 yards. Like, what do you think? What's your analysis on Lamar?
I mean, honestly, that's so low. Like, he's coming off of huge rushing games because he has them, a handful of times a season. So a game where he has 39, I don't think you're like, oh, did he break his leg? Because at the end of the day, that's still a lot of rushing yards for a QB. You need to put that into perspective, but for Lamar, it's low.
Yeah, kind of the pacing of this game was very slow. I mean, almost all of the points were scored in the fourth quarter, so it was 3-6 at halftime.
Yeah.
In favor of the Dolphins, and no scoring in the third quarter. So there really wasn't a lot going on here. It was a lot of back and forth, but no one was scoring many points. So we talked about Devontae Freeman and how he would be a person to consider on the waivers, but I mean, he got you 10 carries for 35 yards and 3 catches for 23 yards, and this is with Latavius Murray inactive yet again. Le'Veon Bell only had 3 carries for a yard. So in terms of identifying the split there, I mean, you feel good about Freeman, but at the same time, with what he did for you against a seemingly a good matchup, you can't feel confident with him.
Yeah, I don't think you can trust this backfield because, I mean, you have to bank on touchdowns with those running backs because what ends up happening is this game where rushing really wasn't working because it didn't work for Jackson like it usually does. It's not like any other running back's going to have more luck. And in games where it is working, Lamar's going to eat. So, like, I don't think there's ever an opportunity where it's either bad for everyone or Lamar steals most of it.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. Let's move on to receivers, and I assume you did not watch much of this game, but
No.
Who would you guess led the team in receiving yards?
Oh, if I
without
had to
looking
guess?
at stats.
Yeah, I'm looking at stats right now. I've seen it. If I had to guess, I would definitely say Marquise Brown. Not Rashad Bateman.
Yeah, Rashad Bateman, 6 catches for 80 yards. I was trying to pick him up in our league, but, being in first place, I had the last waiver opportunity, so
I
you scooped him up and had him riding your bench.
Yes, it would have been a little
bold. How
bold,
you feeling
I
about
think.
that?
Yeah, I didn't really ever consider starting him. It would have been kind of bold, but I'm happy to have him because it seems like he's beginning to become, or not even beginning. He's only played 4 games because he was out the first 5 with injury. He's just been very reliable. He's had a double-digit scoring in every single game except for his very first start. So I like him because...
Yeah, and the other aspect of it, I don't have the number in front of me, but I know that at least every game he's had at least 6 targets, and I know that makes you
Oh, yes.
nice and moist.
Yeah, that makes me happy. And he also, this was his most receptions, tied for most targets, and tied for most receiving yards in this game. So he's on the ups. So it's good to see that for people that have him. And he's still only rostered in 32.5% of leagues. I've been seeing him on lists for, waiver wire column for the week for multiple weeks, even right before he even had his first start, just because people knew he'd have an impact. But he's still only owned in like a third of leagues, so go after him if he hasn't been picked up in your league. You'll have to wait till next week, and now he's becoming consistent, so you might not get him unless you're at the top of the waiver order. But I think he's definitely a player worth rostering for sure.
Yeah, we'll talk more about that next week, but I think that the only concern that I would have would be we haven't really seen, and maybe it's because Lamar hasn't had a lot of weapons around him in the passing game, but how do you feel about him supporting 3 fantasy relevant receivers?
I don't know. I'm not saying that Bateman becomes this super reliable in your lineup every week guy, but I think he's a decent option. Like, I dropped him for Laviska Shenault, which hurt my heart, but like I definitely feel better with the outlook for Bateman than Shenault.
Yeah, so maybe more like a matchup based flex.
Yes. I mean, he's my probably lowest ranked wide receiver on my team, and I think that that's a very good lowest ranked wide receiver to have.
Yeah, sure. I did mention in our previous episode that I thought between Mark Andrews and Marquise Brown, one of them at least would get a touchdown, and I turned out to be right with Mark Andrews.
Nice.
Who, yeah, he pulled it out very late in the game. He had 6 catches for 63 yards and a touchdown. In terms of tight ends, you're happy with that production. Thrilled that he got in the end zone. Not much more to say in a game where Lamar Jackson kind of struggled a bit on offense. I think you're more than happy with that outcome.
Yeah.
And then on the opposite side, Marquise Brown had a disappointing game. 6 catches, which is good in PPR, but 37 yards, no touchdown. Kind of limits him. He was a single-digit scorer this week.
Yeah, and it was on 13 targets, which is surprising. And he also had a fumble, which was recovered by Bateman, which is another interesting fact for this receiving core.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's go ahead and move on to the Dolphins, where yet again, I'm not certain why Miami insisted on keeping Tua available instead of bringing up some other quarterback in order to so that Tua could rest. Because he ended up having to come in for Jacoby Brissett, who left the game with a knee injury. They pretty much had identical days, although Tua was more efficient. 156 passing yards for Brissett and 158 passing yards for Tua. None of them scored a touchdown with their arm. Tua got one with his legs. But but the idea here, I'm not sure why that was the case. Considering what he was able to do, filling in for Brissett with that fractured finger still bothering him, I mean, he did look okay. I mean, I guess it gives you some confidence moving forward that when he is healthy, he's going to be an efficient quarterback for this offense. But I don't know. It's weird. And I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I just think I agree. It's very weird the way that they mismanaged Tua. I mean, this is his second season. This is someone that you should. I get that, re-injuring a fractured finger doesn't have like long-term issues most likely, but like, why even risk him re-aggravating anything? Like, it's like they are unaware of the fact that they can call someone up from like the practice squad to be a backup quarterback. It's like they don't realize that they have that ability. I don't understand it. Tua has been decent, pretty good with the options he's had, because this whole team's been dealing with injuries, so he hasn't always had his entire receiving core, but he's done very well with the full healthy games he's played, and it's just weird. We talked about it last week because we mentioned that this could have happened if Brissett was to get hurt, and then it happened this week. It's like, if we can see that as a predictable thing, how can this coaching staff not see it? And
yeah, it's like take a note out of the Jets playbook, which I wouldn't normally say, but I mean, when you have someone like Mike White or Josh Johnson coming in and playing well, like, these are people that were called up that were not the starters or not even necessarily the backups. What was initially thought. So, yeah, I'm not sure what they're doing there in Miami, but they got the win. You can't complain there. What you can complain with is Myles Gaskin.
Yeah. And he's very predictable. We've called it. I almost feel like our analysis with him week to week has just got to be, is this the double-digit week? Is this the single-digit week? Because that is literally how it's been. It has
he evens and odds. His performances are very noticeable.
Yes, yeah. So play him on odd weeks, I guess we'll say. But I mean, like you said before, real analysis. Even though that seems to be a pretty tried and true method of analysis for him. But it's all
at some point it stops becoming like novel and it becomes like reality. But yeah, I agree that the opportunity was definitely there and we talked about this, but yeah, 14 carries for 31 yards, pretty inefficient running. And in terms of the passing game, he only got you one catch for 14 yards.
11 different players registered a target. That doesn't make you feel good. I guess that we can use that to transition to the receiving core for this offense.
Sure.
Waddle didn't really disappoint you. Gesicki really did. He led the team in targets and got 0 catches. What happened?
That's unlucky.
I don't think I've ever seen that.
Yeah, the only one that really stands out to me is he had a pretty good look that was kind of deep down the middle of the field and just ended up dropping it. But outside of that, yeah, it's very unlucky, very unfortunate that he led the team in targets and didn't get a single catch for you.
Yeah, and then you see Albert Wilson and Isaiah Ford, people I've never heard of before, have almost identical stat lines. Yeah, not a true Dolphins fan. Have very similar stat lines, and they both had double digits in fantasy. But you don't buy that, right? Like these are players that are going to stay in this rotation. It was like the week when the 2 Chris's on the Texans went off.
Right.
Except this team actually does have more options than just one player in Brandon Cooks. They got Waddle, they got Gesicki, they got Parker when he is healthy. Yeah, I don't expect these guys to have another game where they're relevant.
Yeah, this will be their one outlier game performance likely. But I had something that I wanted to ask. Yes. Is Mike Gesicki a buy low opportunity after this game?
If you want to sell high after this double-digit scoring week, I wouldn't trust him. But I see what you're saying. I do think at some point he's got to level out and have some low-end RB2 value at the very least.
Well, what I mean is that for someone who might need a tight end, and you're seeing it that whoever rosters Gesicki, obviously he just put up a bagel, and that might be frustrating to someone who may have a better option or a different option at least on their roster. I just think it might be interesting to pursue, and like I said, if I know that if you rostered Gesicki and we played in a league that required tight ends, I know that you would look at that target number and you'd probably hold on to him. But I think other people don't value that as highly as you do.
Yeah.
And I think that there's an opportunity there for people to pursue a trade involving Gesicki because I think, he, like we've said before, outside of Jalen Waddle, and as long as this receiving core is going to continue to be banged up, I think that Gesicki is the next best option in that offense. And we saw that last night, that he had all of the targets. So
yeah,
he's getting opportunity at the tight end position. That's extremely valuable. I'm just saying there might be something there.
No, you're right. You're a little bit worried about what he looks like when Devontae Parker's back, but if you can find
maybe Will Fuller too.
Him, yeah, him too. But if the fantasy manager that has Gesicki is just done with him after this week, I don't think it's too high stakes for you to go for him. So that's probably not a bad idea. I agree.
Sure. All right. Well, cool. Obviously an unexpected outcome, but that's why they play the games in the NFL instead of just talking about them. So let's move on to news.
I know we can start with, because I think it's the biggest thing that's happened this week, is Odell Beckham Jr. going
Panthers
to the
signing
Rams.
Cam Newton?
Oh, well, that's another big one, but OBJ going to the Rams. Let's start with that one.
Yeah, I know. I was just messing around.
Yeah.
I do believe that, and we'll talk about the next one in a moment, but yeah. Odell Beckham Jr., obviously I'm a little disappointed because there was hope that the Patriots would sign him, but I think this is a good landing spot for him in terms of real NFL because the LA Rams are a hot team. They've got a new quarterback in Matthew Stafford that's been just slinging the ball. Cooper Kupp loves him. Robert Woods is starting to turn around, and now they have Odell Beckham Jr., who, under Sean McVay, I feel like they can definitely find a way to get him involved in the offense. This is an offense that typically or often relies on 3 wide receiver sets. That's why we've seen Van Jefferson perform relatively well this season. I think that this is here's the bottom line, is that if you manager OBJ, this is a disappointing outcome because you wanted OBJ to go and be the top dog wherever he went.
That's true. I do think real NFL, this is a lot more exciting because this Rams team is definitely in contention for winning the Super Bowl. But for fantasy, as someone that has Robert Woods, all I can hope for is that this will just make Kupp a little bit worse. That's all I can hope for.
Whoa, that's hateful. What do you mean?
Just meaning his fantasy value. I feel like if it's gonna, I'm worried that Woods is gonna, lose out to even more targets now that they're also feeding OBJ. But I think what I can hope for is that Kupp still does very well because he's doing so much better than everyone else, but he just loses some targets and some volume because OBJ's in there. I guess what I'm trying to say is I want enough to go around for the 3 of them.
Yeah. Well, I think there's certainly an opportunity for that, and like I said, they rely on 3 wide receiver sets, so it could be something. I think, in terms of his peak value, I think it could be something similar to what we've seen from Antonio Brown at Tampa Bay.
Yeah.
And obviously the low is kind of what we've already seen from him, so your expectations should kind of be set there. But yeah, I think that obviously there were other teams that he could have gone to that would have been more influential fantasy-wise. And if you're at all concerned about OBJ's prospects on the Rams, I think now is your chance to try to trade him.
Yeah, you got until he starts playing, honestly.
Yeah, which is kind of difficult because the Rams go on bye next week. So they play Monday night this week, then they're on a bye week 11, and then week 12. I don't know off the top of my head who they're playing. Do you know?
No, but is there any real chance that he plays this Monday?
I think there is a possibility that he plays limited snaps.
Yeah.
It's certainly not going to be a full exposure. But yeah, I think he probably suits up, but I also don't think that you start him because of that limited opportunity he'll be getting.
Yeah, this is exciting, though, and it'll be interesting to see what happens. This team, fantasy-wise, they supported Brandon Cooks, Robert Woods, and Cooper Kupp that season they went to the Super Bowl. They were all fine. Van Jefferson has some value, so like you were saying. So
among those, so that season, I think Brandon Cooks was hurt a little bit, so he wasn't always there, and then he was always the one that was boom or bust on that trio.
That is true. There will probably be one that is more boom or bust than the others. Honestly, that has been how Van Jefferson's been. I definitely value OBJ higher, but I think that is probably the reality whenever you have that many mouths to feed. We talk about this dilemma every single week with the Cardinals. I like these 3 more than those 3 or 4.
Right. The talent level for this receiving core is presumably the best in the NFL now. Yeah. And I think it's very difficult, just, from a realistic standpoint, I think it's very difficult to support 3 fantasy relevant wide receivers in the same offense. But if anyone can do it, I suppose it's this trio. because they have the talent.
I'm just thinking about this division, NFC West, the Cardinals, Rams, Seahawks, 49ers, just how many fantasy relevant pass catchers there are just in that one division.
Yeah, for real.
That's absurd. It's absurd. Okay, do you want to talk about Cam Newton a bit?
Yeah, just for a little bit. I mean, it's exciting in the sense that we're getting to see Cam Newton back with the franchise that drafted him, and he played most of his career there. But the part where you need to wait and see is that, you know, it's a completely new coaching staff, or at least a completely different head coach. I'm not certain on everyone there, but it's a new head coach. It's a new receivers that he's not familiar with, and I mean, Cam Newton hasn't played football at all this season, so there's a possibility that he's been, I don't know, laying on the couch, not doing a lot, but I don't think that's the case. What I'm trying to say is that maybe don't set your expectations too high that you find yourself being disappointed by him. I think he's going to be usable at some point this season, especially in 2 quarterback leagues. But I think that in terms of like a 10-team, 1 quarterback league, you're probably reaching for Cam Newton, and I'm targeting you when I say that because you picked him up in our league.
I don't have a reliable backup. I don't have a Kirk Cousins like you do, and I have Kyler, so I'm kind of looking for my next options. But yeah, I was like, might as well. I had Taysom Hill there before, and if he doesn't get the start, he's literally unusable. So
yeah, he's not. Trevor Siemian will start.
Yeah, so that's why I dropped him for Cam. I mean, Cam, Darnold is out for 4 to 6 weeks. Wasn't that the timeline?
At least 4. The minimum was 4.
Okay, so Cam's probably not going to play this weekend, but it starts week 11. And I will say I do think there's some good matchups for him, though. The first game he starts in week 11 would be against Washington, which is good.
Yeah, you like that.
At Miami.
Against his former coach, Ron Rivera.
That's true. At Miami, which we saw Lamar didn't do well, but I still feel like you feel pretty good about that matchup. Home to Atlanta.
Yeah, you like that.
At Buffalo, you don't like.
Nope.
And then I don't know if you'd still be playing at this point, but home to Tampa Bay, you like that for passing.
Sort of.
At New Orleans, you don't love that. And at Tampa Bay again. So I
that's
think
through week 18?
Yeah, that's through the rest of the season. I think that's, I mean, other than Buffalo
and they have
the
a bye.
Saints,
They'll have a bye in week 14.
Yeah.
So I think what it'll really come down to is he's going to have a few games to kind of, get used to the offense and get his feet under him. And then I think, with how bad Sam Darnold has played leading up to his injury, I don't think they're necessarily going to rush back to get him in the starting quarterback position, but
yeah,
it'll be a conversation at that point when Darnold's healthy how Cam Newton has been playing.
Yeah, I mean, does this make you feel better about DJ Moore? I mean, it has to.
Not
can't be much lower.
Yeah, that's what we said before, is that it can't get much worse. My concern would be the way that I watched Cam Newton play when he was on the Patriots last year. He was pretty much a wildcat running back.
I think what will be very interesting to see how they manage him, because the way he played last season definitely cannot coexist with Christian McCaffrey. So
yeah,
that will be interesting.
Yeah, it'll be something to watch as the weeks continue, but we can move on to some other news stuff.
Some more injury specific news.
Yeah, big news there. Let's start with the obvious one. Alvin Kamara has been ruled out.
I don't feel good about that. I mean,
so Mark Ingram is, I believe he's 20 yards shy of tying the franchise rushing record. So I think that it's a given that this week, if you want to tune in for some history, you can watch that happen this week. And that's exciting for him and the franchise. But yeah, for people who manage Alvin Kamara, that's a big loss. He did not practice all week with a knee injury, and he's being held out this Sunday. So that's a tough loss, and I can speak to that directly because my opponent this week has Alvin Kamara. Apologies, Jack, but I'm without Nick Chubb, so I mean we're kind of even there.
Do you think Mark Ingram has any flex value, or probably not?
So the Saints are playing. Who are they playing? I
Tennessee.
forget off the top. Tennessee. So here's I think what's going to happen is that Mark Ingram is going to get the bulk of the touches, the carries especially, and we've seen him do. He hasn't been the most efficient, but he has shown himself to be capable of having a heavy workload. The other part is that it is Trevor Siemian at quarterback. That's been confirmed. So I think that if you throw him in at flex, I definitely wouldn't look at you funny because I think that he is going to get a lot of touches in this offense.
Yeah, I feel like he'll have a pretty high floor, at the very least. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, agreed.
Move on from this one.
Sure. Yeah, and I alluded to it, but we can talk about Nick Chubb has officially been ruled out due to COVID-19. So that means that D'Ernest Johnson will get the start against my Patriots. I don't love that matchup for him, and so I'm a little bit hesitant to throw him into my lineup, if I were to roster him, but I think that you feel a little bit more confident you can speak to that.
I mean, I just, trust is a strong word, but it's hard to deny what he did against the Broncos in Thursday Night Football in week 8 or whatever it was, whenever Hunt and Chubb were both first out. He did amazing that game. Do I expect that to happen again? No. I mean, I don't think he's as strong as an Alexander Madison. You're very confident playing Madison if Cook is out. I don't think you don't feel that strongly about D'Ernest Johnson, but again, I like him much more than Mark Ingram in a similar situation. Do you agree to that?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, yeah, I guess I don't disagree with that. I think that, they're both tough defenses, and I think they're both top 12 teams against the run, so you don't love your prospects there. I think that D'Ernest Johnson's probably a more reliable pass catcher than Mark Ingram at this stage, but either way, if you roster those lead backs and you have those handcuffs, I think you have to.
Yeah.
You probably don't have better options. So from that perspective, but probably lower expectations just because, they're the backups for a reason.
Yeah, I do feel pretty good about him, though, but, I mean, the ESPN Fantasy app has him projected at 17.4. I think that's ridiculous.
Yeah, I think that's a bit high.
That is definitely high. I think that I'd be surprised if he doesn't get double digits, personally, but 17 is bold. But that's just how I feel about him.
No, I agree with that.
Ton of game time decisions. Well, I guess, okay,
yeah,
we can talk about this first, actually. We'll focus on the people that have been ruled out. Antonio Brown and Rob Gronkowski, if you want to talk about the Buccaneers a bit.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, Chris Godwin will be a game time decision.
Yes.
But Antonio Brown and Rob Gronkowski have been ruled out, so that does kind of change the outlook a little bit for, players like Mike Evans, as well as Tyler Johnson, who is going to get some more looks, presumably with Brown being out. I don't really trust any of the tight ends between O.J. Howard. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, Cameron Brate. Both of those guys, they really just haven't, there's been a lot of games with Gronkowski out, and none of them have ever really showed up in this season. So if you have Gronkowski, it hurts, but you got to look elsewhere. Outside of the Bucs, I think, the matchup is really good, but I think just the way that those tight ends are used whenever Gronkowski is out, when he's absent, it's still not really warranting them getting the start in your roster, I believe.
Yeah, I agree with that. Do we just want to do some like quick fire analysis on like if you're playing these guys, if they end up suiting up because their game time doesn't suit? I mean, you're starting Kyler and Hopkins if they're activated, correct?
Yeah, I think that like Kyler Murray has been very optimistic, and Cliff Kingsbury has talked about how he's progressed really well with his ankle injury, and obviously you feel. Go ahead.
I mean, I just read today that Murray was participating, probably limited, in practice today, and I just think that it makes me feel optimistic that he'll play this week, just because they were still considering playing him even if he didn't log a practice. So that makes me feel better that he at least got some participation in practice this week. And, as far it's an ankle injury, so you don't feel amazing. If he's starting, you're playing him, but it hurts his rushing ability probably. But his rushing this season has not been anywhere near what it was last season.
Yeah, it's been pretty minimal with what you can expect from him.
Yeah, I mean, you loved the floor that gave him, quite literally, last season as a quarterback, as a fantasy quarterback. But just seeing him be able to do it just as a passer is also reassuring for his value and just as an NFL quarterback.
Yeah, certainly. Along those same lines, Chase Edmonds has been ruled out for Sunday, so it's going to be the goal line chow hound of James Conner.
I think you got to start him. I mean, we talked about this a little bit in our matchup previews episode, but I mean,
yeah, we saw him get it done on the ground and through the air. I think that the matchup is not great. Let me look that up real quick. I think it's Cardinals, the Panthers. Yeah,
it's
the Panthers. So not a great matchup, but
I'm just saying the stat line we saw for James Conner. I mean, he led the entire league in fantasy points in Week 9, but just the way he was looking and the production he had, he looked like what season was it? 2018 Steelers, 2019 Steelers. Like this is if you haven't been playing fantasy for I guess over a year or so, you probably don't know that this guy used to be an RB1. So not that I think he's returning into that status, but I think it's enough to give you hope that you can safely start him in Chase Edmonds' absence.
Yeah, I agree with that. Another Chase that has been rolled out is Chase Claypool. He will not be playing Sunday for the Steelers. So let me ask you this. How does that make you feel about other pass catchers not named Deontay Johnson?
What's been weird about Chase Claypool is that whenever Juju went out for the season, I expected Claypool to be much better, but he honestly hasn't even had a great game in Juju's absence. But, I mean, he still is a threat in that offense that defenses need to accommodate for. I mean, I think that Deontay's fine. I don't think that he's going to be the only person defenses. I mean, they're playing Detroit. I don't think he's the only person they need to worry about. Not that I think that, like, James Washington, I think is his name, or Ray McLeod are, like, fantasy relevant. But the fact that I can name them gives me assurance that, they have talent, and there's still plenty of people that defense needs to worry about. So, personally, I'm not worried about Deontay Johnson or, I guess, Freiermuth. Just because they've both been. I mean, Johnson kind of had an off game last week, but it wasn't awful, and Freiermuth had an amazing game. I expect that you can definitely trust Johnson, and I expect Freiermuth to be a decent tight end play, honestly.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think if anyone's going to step up in Claypool's place that's a wide receiver, I think it is James Washington, who's always kind of a deep threat, someone who can always, run for a long touchdown. But yeah, I think probably Freiermuth would be, I'd feel more comfortable starting. But of course, that's a tight end, and you're not going to start two tight ends with your flex in standard formats. Yeah. So if you have Freiermuth, if you picked him up this week, you feel a little bit better with Claypool being out. And if not, I think James Washington is a flex play in deeper leagues.
Agreed. The only other thing is...
my last inactive is Jamaal Williams, and this isn't really all that exciting because honestly, you probably weren't starting Jamaal Williams, any of the weeks after probably like week 2 or 3. So the one thing it does show you is that this is one of the first weeks where DeAndre Swift has not been on the injury report. And so I expect a heavy workload for him, especially with coming in with no designation. He already gets a lot of touches, but with Jamaal Williams being ruled out, I think that it's going to be just even more touches for DeAndre Swift. Could be a really big Swift game.
Yeah, I do agree. I also do kind of think that it could take away from his receiving game a bit, just because, I mean, he's got to take a breath at some point.
He's young, though. He can do
Yeah,
it. He can do
no,
it all.
he can do it, and it is reassuring that the 1 week he doesn't have an injury designation is the week that Williams is out. So you're definitely confident in starting him for sure.
Yeah. I'm going to do a quick update on anything coming up that's relevant.
A lot of injury designations this week, so keep your eye out on all of these people. I mean, we were just talking
Julio
about the game time
Jones.
decisions, but
Julio Jones did not practice due to a hamstring injury, so you don't feel good about that. Keep an eye on Patriots running backs Damien Harris and Rhamondre Stevenson, who are still considered questionable, although neither of them practiced all week. I will say that the Patriots didn't make any moves similar to the Dolphins in the sense that they didn't bring up any new players from the practice squad or make any kind of roster adjustments. So I do kind of feel like, especially with them not being ruled out despite not practicing, I feel like it's likely that one of them, if not both, could still be available.
yes. And as we already said in matchup previews, I don't think you feel good with starting Brandon Bolden, or what's the other guy's name? JJ Taylor.
JJ Taylor, yeah.
I mean, they're both
there.
projected 11.3 and 10.1 respectively. I don't really buy that there's enough to go around of just the way this offense uses their running backs when their top guy is out. But if you're desperate, they should get the touches, but I don't feel good about them. This is not a situation where you feel good about the next guy stepping up just because of how this offense operates. I mean, you really only feel good starting Harris out of that backfield.
Yeah, agreed on that. So I think we can wrap up here. Thank you all for listening. Hope you enjoyed the news. Good luck in your Week 10 matchup, and enjoy the football. Thanks, guys.